Okay, so um, this is the first in a series of conferences on identifying the worldly mentality that we are to reject. And I think um, if we know what the worldly mentality is, then we can kind of shield ourselves against it. And of course, Saint Bernard says in his sixth homily on the Ascension, he talks about how the world and the spirit of the world, if we leave a door open, a window open, a crack open, like oil, it just kind of seeps through and tries to flood ourselves. And we're going to go over those general ideas, those general worldly attitudes eventually, that I think should be obvious in their rejection. So that's why we're not starting there. So like an obvious worldly mentality is eat, drink, be merry, for tomorrow we die. All right, that's a famous one. Many people live that way. So we're not starting there because I think you can already tell just with a basic Christian, let alone Catholic or advanced, the basic Christian attitude that the cross clearly contradicts that. And so in a way, just by having a simple Christian understanding, we know at least that attitude is wrong. And so what I want to present to you today is what I will call the refined secular mindset. I wish to put in front of you what a devil, a fork-tongued devil, and his persuasiveness, his glamour, his learning. I wish to put in front of you the deceiver. And in order to do that, I want to start with this intellectualized, this proud fostering, this secular worldly mentality, and something that I see passed around the internet quite frequently. And it's called Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs. Have you heard of it before? Okay. And I'm going to preface this with a few remarks. I have not read the work by Maslow, which was in, I believe, the early 1940s, extensively. I've only read summaries of it. And I've also read mostly secondary sources discussing Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Mostly people use these needs to manipulate themselves or to try to find an identity for themselves in their humanity when they do not, either in a real way, recognize themselves as made in the image of God, or even in their Christianity don't understand the profound dignity that they have. But rather they seek an explanation that they deem as rational as to how they feel feelings of euphoria that they have misconstrued within themselves to be feelings of happiness. Euphoria and the sensation of euphoria is something that obviously drags men about all over the place and is stupid. And I'll give you some just concrete examples. There was once an article I read talking about how a man was tempted to suicide, and instead of killing himself, he decided before he killed himself, he would go down to Mexico and engage in every manner of ill living, which meant drunkenness, drugs, and debauchery. And upon doing this, this livened up his spirits enough to realize to not kill himself. Okay? He experienced feelings of euphoria. Okay? Or people saying, my goal every day is to be happy. I want to be happy. If you've ever met one of these poor people who don't know how to be sad or sorrowful, they're really quite a spectacle to behold. And have you seen the Lego movie? Everything is awesome. Have you? You haven't?
You're part of a team.
Have you seen the Lego movie?
Everything is awesome.
I have 5 kids. I've seen the Lego movie. There's a great scene. There's a little, like, weird unicorn character. who's constantly being bubbly and happy, and her entire world is destroyed by the bad Legos. And despite this, she keeps trying to keep thinking of raindrops and bubble gum and happy thoughts, but she can't, and she starts to weep, and then she morphs into this demon. Okay, people who try to be positive even when the world is sorrowful. G.K. Chesterton, Father Brown. Okay, have you read Father Brown? What are we going to do with you? We're going to have to put you on a Catholic cultural thing. No, I'm joking. There's a great line in it. There was a character in one of the stories where he was constantly cheerful, and somebody remarks to Father Brown, well, isn't it great that he's always cheerful? And Father Brown says back to me, he says, no, if there was one man I was to ever kill, it was a man that always was cheerful under all circumstances, because they're a bore. It's awful. I mean, even Christ wept while he wept Lazarus and Jerusalem. He was sorrowful in the garden. Part of our humanity is that. So people, what they're really saying is, I want to live a life of constant euphoria. I want constant positive feelings, which is pathetic. Law of diminishing returns, which is a true concept, even though it's a secular one, shows that that's impossible. Okay? But people want to rationalize themselves. What they want to do is justify themselves in sin. And so I think the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and we're just going to take it at this little pictograph that I have here. I think this highlights this rationalization, and I'm going to go over it. And at the very bottom we have physiological needs, which he has as food, water, and sleep. So basically that the first thing that a man looks for to realize himself is just to sustain his life. Followed by safety. Home sweet home. Whether that's safety in being in a tribe, right, primitive people, or the safety of maybe home ownership, a permanent job position, the idea of security. That's the next thing he looks for, right? Then he looks for a feeling of love and belonging. So that would be, for example, marriage, girlfriends, religion, the love of friendships, right? But he is loved and belongs. That's the next thing he seeks. So he has a full stomach, he feels secure, and he feels love, right? Then the next thing he looks for to feel happy is esteem, right? So he wants to be recognized for how awesome he is. He wants to say, hey, you're a good guy. Glory to you, right? And then last, self-actualization. Which, I mean, this has a multitude of meaning. But and not to downgrade it, but basically this would be the level where you're going, I am me and I am great. Like I contribute to society and I'm being honored for that, and I'm one with myself, kind of. That's the last thing he looks for. With even a basic knowledge of the gospel, we know that this is false. But why is it persuasive? Because it makes some degree of sense. If you've ever experienced real hunger, I mean going out without food for a few days, barring you have religion, to say you start to think about food a lot is an understatement, right? Or thirst, which won't even take a few days. It'll take a matter of hours before you're in pain. And we look to relieve that thirst however we can. Or the notion of safety, right? That when we feel insecure in our jobs, or we feel insecure in our marriages, or we feel insecure in our circumstances, we're at wit's end, right? We're sad, we're cast down, and we look for anything we can to find security. I mean, when you read about soldiers like sleeping with their rifles, right? They're desperately seeking a sense of security amidst these terrors that they live with. Or love and belonging, right? That when we don't feel loved, right, by anybody, we're sad and we view this as this terrible thing. Now, of course, if we feel like, if we're looking for water, we're not too worried about love. And if we don't feel security, then we oftentimes look to like secure ourselves before we look for love. And so on and so forth. Okay, but why is this wrong? Well, Christ faced these temptations in the desert, right? And he was hungry, and the devil said, right, command these stones to turn them into bread. And he goes, man does not live on bread alone, but from every word that comes forth from God, right? Or he also says, right, do not worry about what you are to eat, or to drink, or to wear. God knows you have need of all these things. Seek first the kingdom of God, right? So God comes in and he goes, if you want to be my disciple, you need to put these physiological needs aside. You need to entrust them to me, right? You need to entrust them to me. And that is the only thing. Next thing, safety. Who can hide from the living God? No one. Who hides from death? In fact, all we're able to do in this life is deceive ourselves in our security. Now, we can take certain steps, right? I mean, like I forgot in what book it is, but right, we have to make certain plans, like to secure ourselves. We should, I mean, when they rebuilt the walls of Jerusalem, it said they did so with a sword in their hand and a stone in the other, alluding that they had to seek after to defend themselves. But right, who decides what every battle is won by? God. It's in the book of Exodus. Right? God decides. God is God. He decides. Or is it Deuteronomy? I forgot which book. God decides who wins every battle. God decides whether you live or die. Psalm 91, right? All the arrows encompassed me about, right? But you brought me forth through it. God decides if you're going to live or die. Every waking moment. Thus, the only true security we find is in God, which once again goes back to this physiological needs. Who gives us our daily bread? God does. Who provides for our daily needs? God does. Not our own efforts or our own that. God does. Now, he does make us work, which is the penance he assigned to all mankind. God decides these things. Okay. Sense of love and belonging. Once again, this notion that one must have a full belly or have safety to then seek after love and belonging, human experience would indicate otherwise. Why? If anybody's ever experienced the death of a loved one, a breakup of a romantic relationship, do you have much desire to eat, drink, or sleep? No. Do you care about your safety? No. In fact, many people would rather die than endure the sorrow of it. So we know just based on that alone that love can override any sense of safety and any physiological needs. People kill themselves over a requited love. So we know next that this notion that a full stomach leads to the desire for safety and then love, that's absurd. People go through extreme lengths to experience love. Okay. And that's not even the romantic in me. That's just, like, look at human history, look at your own life. If you do not feel loved, you will feel cast down. In fact, you may not even want to live. Okay. By the way, children during the Soviet Union, in the very early times of it, before Stalin came to power, bastard children were everywhere. They had the most lax society in terms of sexual morality. And children would be dropped off at orphanages constantly. And many of the children would die, even though they were being fed, because no one would hold them. They'd die from a lot of broken hearts. Children will die of a broken heart if they're not held when they weep. So you don't know that. Finally, the self-esteem. All right, hunger strikes, which is just one of the most vain things a person can do. By all means, in your life, fast for repentance or whatever, but hunger strikes, public nonsense like that. People are risking their physiological needs, their safety, to experience esteem. There, I've overridden this Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So no, esteem can make people all the time sacrifice their very lives in the hope of gaining honor. Look through the annals of the great soldiers throughout history, especially pagan warriors. Sometimes they would do things just for the honor and glory of Rome or Caesar and lay down their lives.
Get away from her this minute.
Mommy, I'm recording. Yeah. Oh well. This is a family operation. And then the self-actualization. I mean, can we call it the height of stupidity? I guess then, I guess the only thing I could say about it is what's left. I mean, I hate using the term bourgeois because it's arrogant. But I'm not going to use the term bourgeois. I'll just say, talk about an elite mentality. Well, I'm full, I'm safe, I feel loved, everybody thinks I'm awesome, I'm a god. That's what this pyramid says. Self-actualization, I've reached my full potential. How dare anybody even say such a thing? How silly it is to even say such a thing. Because what one is saying there is, I have defined the limits of virtue and I have met them all, which is retarded. Now, I'm sure somebody might extensively have read on Maslow's need, and maybe he added parameters in this. Once again, I'm only talking about the way the secular world sees these things. By the way, does self-actualization actually mean any type of happiness? No. Law of diminishing returns. Even if you self-actualize your existence as being just super awesome, every day you live after that, are you going to be a little more awesome if you've already fulfilled everything? See, it's a contradiction. It doesn't work. Okay? So how does the Christian, how can we see this? Can we use this to understand anything? Yes. This is wrong. The first and most important thing in our life is to make sure that we love God and are loved by Him. And then nothing else, other than that relationship, which as it grows, requires an increase of humility and charity and self-sacrifice, and oftentimes at the expense of safety, of self-actualization. Because instead of self-actualizing, you're going to be obedient. Instead of feeling safe, you're going to risk your bodily health, right? Fear not the ones who can kill the body. Whoever loves his life will lose it. Anybody who hates his life shall keep it unto life everlasting. Right? It's almost like you follow you just throw this all out. With that being said, there is one part of this that is true. St. James says in his epistle, do not say, I bless you and have my faith and religion, while your brother is starving to death and naked. When we try to bring people into this holy faith, and they suffer bodily needs, we should not just bless them and pray for them if we can actually relieve a real, tangible, and visible suffering. This is harder to do today because of all the institutes of aid that are available, and the fact that we live in abundance here in the West, at least in terms of temporal, smaller goods such as food and clothing, all the housing and medical care and everything else is now soul-destroyingly expensive. But we do need to remember that we in order to spread the gospel, there is a certain measure of relieving the needs of our neighbor that is required in order to do so. We can't say to people, follow after Christ, and Christ demands that we help our neighbor in need and then not help his needs. And that means even loving the unlovable, dealing with people who are lonely, who did so through their own mistakes or their own deeply flawed characters, and providing people a certain degree of safety and the affection that we hold for them. So we can use a little of this to say that a person who is starving probably isn't thinking of salvation at that time if they are under the servitude of the devil. In fact, they are thinking about only their needs or their safety or other things. So anyway, so that's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It is the worldly mentality, and just if anybody ever thinks they've got it all figured out, you can at least shatter it by looking at them and saying, oh, then why do people, when they feel unloved, commit suicide if they have a full stomach? Or why would esteem even come before self-actualization? Or why do people even offer to die for glory, even their own glory, rather than be self-actualized? Right? We know it's false just by poking it a little bit. And by poking it a little bit, you can preserve yourself from this error.